if someone else beside you came to you and said, I want to make episode 7? Could you see that happening?
No. The year is 2012. Disney purchases a golden ticket for $4 billion, making this very depressed and very sad man very, very happy.
I may have gone too far in a few places.
And that was the day Star Wars died.
I'm gonna shoot my own.
Go ahead.
But it was a slow death, not like chopping off someone's head. Kind of like a death by 1,000 tiny cuts.
Here. Or maybe across the belly, spilling your intestines.
At least according to people on the internet. Look, I don't actually think it needs to be expressed how big Star Wars is. It is the most influential cultural event in the history of humanity. Literally.
Turn off the flash, you fucking moron!
It's so big that when most people hear the word sci-fi, the first thing that pops into their minds is Star Wars. I believe that no matter how tarnished the brand becomes, it will always find a way to stick around no matter what. But actually, I don't know so much anymore. It seems like less people are interested in Star Wars than like when the trailer for The Force Awakens came out 11 years ago now. Is it not crazy that 20 years ago, Star Wars was the most relevant popular culture franchise ever, and now it just seems like no one fucking cares? This company was handed a golden ticket for $4 billion, and they just kind of ripped it up and scattered the pieces all over the place. And now have reached out to grasp whatever talented people they can get their hands on to put that ticket back together again. It's like the corporate American version of Humpty Dumpty. All of the king's horses and all of the king's men couldn't put Star Wars back together again. One of those king's horses, though, is Tony Gilroy, who wrote the script for Rogue One, which, as you know, is a decent movie. Although, to be honest, not a big fan of the CGI faces. And Tony Gilroy created and is the main showrunner for this little indie series called Andor, which, as you know, is actually fucking amazing. Holy shit!
To make a sunrise that I know I'll never see. Now, the ego that started this fight will never have a mirror or an audience or the light of gratitude. So what do I sacrifice? Everything!
Holy shit. You know what actually shocked me? I didn't think Star Wars under Disney's family-friendly corporate umbrella could be anything other than lame sci-fi slop made for children as its target audience.
They fly now!
It works, not just as a Star Wars show, but as a show, with a narrative and character arcs with different motivations.
Everything!
And yet, it still finds a way to deepen the world and the lore. You know, it even has bricks and screws. And it made me realize that this...
We're going together. I'll tell them what happened.
This shit ain't for kids anymore. This narrative that Star Wars has to be for children is a little confusing to me, because there's a big difference in making media to also be enjoyed by children and treating your audience like children. There's Ratatouille, and then there's also Despicable Me 3. Both are family friendly, but one clearly has the source to be enjoyed by all ages. I mean, yeah, obviously most people fall in love with Star Wars as children, me included. I mean, actually, the first Star Wars I personally ever consumed was when I was 5 years old, playing Star Wars Battlefront 2 on my older brother's PS2, while my parents were screaming for a divorce in the downstairs kitchen.
You son of a bitch! Every day I wake up and I hope you're dead. Then, if I can guarantee Henry will be okay, I hope you get an illness and they get hit by a car and die.
I was creating some of my fondest childhood memories. So to me, Star Wars was nothing more than wars and pew 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 pew. and the... yeah, that sound. It wasn't until a few years later, when I was a little older, did I first watch the movies. And I think I watched them in literally the worst order. The first order. As a kid, back in the DVD era, I had Empire Strikes Back, Return of the Jedi, Revenge of the Sith, and a disc copy of Attack of the Clones, which would freeze at this moment for some reason. So in my eyes, Obi-Wan got fucking killed by Boba Fett's dad.
Get him, Dad! Get him!
So I never really watched the original 6 movies properly until a little later, when I actually got proper access to these movies. And then Disney bought Star Wars. You know the story.
You know, they wanted to do a retro movie. I don't like that. Every movie I worked very hard to make them different.
And the direction they went in was to just tell the same story again.
Mayfire when ready.
And that's when I realized that Star Wars cannot grow up. It will never attempt to change and adapt, simply because it has always been and will always be family friendly, and it will be stuck in that mold to make as much money as possible. But I actually disagree.
These are my kids. I loved them, I created them. I'm very intimately involved in them, and I sold them to the white slavers that...
What? Even he pointed a gun at my head. You could not convince me that Star Wars is only for children. George Lucas says...
You know, it's a film for 12-year-olds.
Oh really, George? Oh really?
I don't like that. I like white slavers.
Huh? Tell me what 12-year-old is able to understand the 50 minutes of screen time you spent yapping about politics in the prequel movies. Kids today, like when I first saw them, just care about lasers and lightsabers.
I thought it was pretty good.
Adults, on the other hand,
thumbs way down.
You didn't like it?
No.
You need something more challenging and dynamic story-wise to actually keep them engaged.
I think the lightsaber battles were the great.
Especially nowadays, when you can get lasers and explosions elsewhere, like in Transformers, Marvel, Godzilla, or Doom. Back in 1977, Star Wars was the only franchise in which you could witness these jaw-dropping special effects. In 1999, Star Wars was one of the few franchises in which you could witness peak computer-generated technology.
Jar Jar is a key to all this.
Now, so many other franchises offer those same explosions and lasers, and now there are even other mediums competing for an audience. So a major element to what made Star Wars such a jaw-dropping and genre-defining hit back in the day is no longer a major selling point for the franchise.
The movie is filled from beginning to end with elaborate special effects.
$8 million worth of special effects alone.
I think it was an excellent movie. I think Mr. Lucas did a fabulous job of special effects.
It was amazing. A lot of callbacks to the old movies.
The movie led you to believe certain things, and then it was just like, nope.
Disney, you stupid mouse motherfuckers. You need to do more to justify people actually tuning in and watching this shit, other than fancy lightsabers go zoom, zoom, zoom. And the best way to do this is to take it into new avenues and craft interesting and dynamic, well-written stories. Like Andor. I'm willing to bet that like 70% of the people that watch Star Wars now aren't even kids. The majority of its fans are grown-ass men. So with that being said, if Star Wars wants to survive another 50 years, then the answer is simple. It needs to grow up and change and treat itself a bit more seriously. I'm not saying everything needs to be super dark and edgy like Andor. It obviously can have that light-hearted joy and whimsy which made Star Wars so popular in the first place. But what I mean more specifically is that where Andor already assumes that its audience are smart, other Disney Plus Star Wars shows and even other projects treat the audience like children. Why don't you just go around? One of the big distinctions is, and I want to get it out of the way quickly, is the y'all got any good writing? Nah, we just got hype moments and aura that infects the new Star Wars. Star Wars lives so heavily in the past that it just can't escape it, and therefore can only rely on references to older things and cool fight scenes. This was both one of the best things about Rogue One and also its biggest hindrance. When I watch these shows, it just feels like it's jangling keys in front of me, like, look, and it's oh my god, it's Darth Vader, oh my god, look, it's that guy, I know that guy. Look, it's this guy, you know him. It's incredible how it's kind of become like the MCU, where it's so obvious and almost condescending at times. And I look around and I see some people cheer the shit on, which confuses me. Like, yeah, dude, it's cool to see Darth Vader fuck shit up. It's cool to see Luke Skywalker fuck shit up. It's cool to see Anakin Skywalker fuck shit up. It's cool to see whatever this is. But isn't it kind of sad how this is the most memorable thing about the show? Not, you know, the main character, which is the title of the show. Why does it have to fall back and rely on this? None of these shows really feel that worthwhile or justify their existence. And most of these share one common flaw. Risk, or lack thereof. In the Ahsoka show, she gets stabbed. You know, the thing that killed Qui-Gon? And like every other living person in Star Wars, but nope, she just survives it. Like what? Boba Fett, dead? Nope, he comes back.
Cabeza.
Palpatine, dead? Nope, he comes back. Mace Windu, dead? Nope, he comes back. James L. Jones, dead? Nope, they're going to use an AI voice of him forever.
Freaking fucking. Such vulgarity doesn't.
If characters die and can come back to life, then how can there be any stakes in watching these characters fight? If characters are going to risk their lives, but we, the audience, see no repercussions, then what's the point? Andor opens with two Imperial officers who decide to harass Cassian to rob him.
He wanted you take it and I walk away.
Maybe beat him up. And get away with it because they are corrupt authority figures. But there's a struggle and one of the officers dies.
He's not breathing. No. Burlo!
And then the other begs for his life. And Andor, you know, says fuck you and kills him. But it's treated with weight and gravity. You feel the repercussions of this one event as it comes back to haunt Cassian and his community. It's a canon event, bro. Just like how the Kenobi show is set before A New Hope, Rogue One came out before Andor, so you know Cassian will survive. But it's the other characters, the ones we haven't seen before in Star Wars that Cassian interacts with, are what creates suspense. Brasso, Bix, his droid who has a stutter,
came back because
his mother, Lutheran,
everything,
Kino Loy.
Never more than 12.
Even the antagonists you come to care about and get invested in. So many characters are introduced that we really come to care about. In that we hope can make it out alive. But, now don't tell anybody else I told you this. You gotta keep it a secret. But some of them die. I just ain't gonna tell you who just yet. Just placing a dude with a lightsaber and 30 cannon fodder gets kind of boring after a while. Because you know, there's no risk in that. If you want this brand to actually survive, you gotta craft interesting stories that deepen the world. Explore it from a new angle. Make it more grounded maybe. Or perhaps have a concrete vision of where you want it to go and how you want it to end. And having said that, Andor, once again, is exactly that. I think the real reason as to why Andor has been a big step in the right direction is that it's a combination of many talented people who actually care about Star Wars. I think it's fair to say that what George Lucas really created was actually a playground for endless creative possibilities for stories to be told. George is not the only reason Star Wars was such a huge success. Largely, he kinda just got really lucky. The dude can't write dialogue.
It's a true story. Harrison Ford, who plays the space pirate in the film, at one point threatened to tie George up and make him say his own lines at gunpoint.
You can type this stuff, but you can't say it.
He had like the anti-eye for direction, which would lead to a lot of scenes end up looking like this. Where he shined was that he had the idea and knew which people would make it come to life, such as Ralph McQuarrie's brilliant art, which kicked off a lot of the visually dynamic designs which would make Star Wars so fun to watch in the first place. The first cut of A New Hope was so bad that George Lucas freaked out, fired the editor, then hired his wife, who was actually the editor for Taxi Driver, which is a fucking masterpiece, to turn what was allegedly unwatchable into the blueprint for the summer blockbuster. Phil Tippett, Dennis Muren, who developed the special effects and paved the way for many other movies to be made. Irving Kershner, who cemented Star Wars as a franchise, who was also much taller.
Kershner's much taller.
And John Williams, who quite literally created out of thin air the most iconic soundtrack to ever grace the planet right now. When anyone hears that iconic sound... Yep, I'm a kid again. What I'm trying to say is that Star Wars isn't successful because of one guy. It's the culmination of many talented people who largely did their own thing because this one guy had a really good idea with a very distinct vision which helped these many talented people do their thing.
Get creative people to invest, make it theirs, and back away and let the creative people, run with it.
If you get talented artists, give them some direction and enough freedom to spark their imagination, they will come up with something extraordinary and, more importantly, new and fresh. Andor is just the one Disney Star Wars product that encapsulates this. All of these other Disney Plus shows feel like a general lack of care and attention to detail hindered them. Andor doesn't feel like it has to bend the knee though.
What is that?
It feels like many talented people have come together and have bounced ideas off of each other to create a very well written and engaging piece of media, both visually and narratively. I'm gonna touch on this briefly, but I pinky promise it's important. But what I find funny about this prequel revisionism that a lot of people yap about is that almost everything people hate about modern movies today is like injected on steroids with the prequel trilogy.
What?
Cringe dialogue, over-reliance on CGI, weightless cinematography, goofy action. And I do think it's important to remember that if the prequels were as good as a lot of people claim that they are, George would have never sold the franchise to Disney. Relax, quit writing your comment. Whenever I watch the prequels, although I do love them and have a certain level of nostalgia for them, I just think of that one clip of Sir Ian McKellen on the set of The Hobbit, where he had to act alone in a green screen room and he just breaks down crying.
A great deal.
It is genuinely one of the saddest clips I think I've ever seen. And I think this can explain the key problem with the prequels, which can explain all of those other issues I listed before. But when Revenge of the Sith came out in 2005, it really came into its own. Commercially and artistically. This random moviegoer for The Phantom Menace said it best, actually.
If you're looking for a visual stunner, this is your movie. Unfortunately, I found that because it was so visual, a lot of the human element and the story got pushed out of the frame.
I think that one of the few good things Disney has done with Star Wars is learn from this mistake in the visual department. And that becomes even more apparent in Andor, because from a pure stylistic filmmaking perspective, this is by far the best Star Wars we have gotten in a long time. The CGI is used as a tool when necessary. The acting is top notch. The dialogue is something you'd expect from a HBO show like The Sopranos or The Wire. There is a clear vision for what Tony Gilroy wants the show to be, and it goes about achieving that with no hindrances. Something I really appreciate about Andor is that it actually uses real life shooting locations with real sets, and you can tell the actors are much more at home in their characters and not crying on a green screen. There is a sense of proper scale that I haven't really seen in other Star Wars media. Instead of pushing this, that, and the other to go bigger and better, Andor grounds you in real bars, real streets, real forests, real locations, which makes it feel very alive and sprawling in an intricate kind of way that a lot of other Star Wars media fails to achieve. It places way more importance on the switches, the dials, the knobs and buttons, eating nuts even. Other little things like cereal that is served with blue milk. Fucking freak. There is so much importance placed on the little stuff, which I think is what makes Andor so great visually. The type of sensory overload you get on the little things, which ends up making a big difference in how you view the show. It's yet another massive sci-fi opera, but through the lens of the little guy on the ground. So it shows you more emphasis on all the small things to make you feel like you yourself can interact with it, which in turn makes moments like the Gorman massacre much more impactful. Because when it has its moment, when it needs to go bigger, you feel more weight behind it. Comprende. Hold on, listen. Take a seat. Why don't you go take a seat right over there? Take a look at this shot. This is actually the first 20 seconds of Star Wars. The very first 20 seconds of the most influential piece of media of all time. The very, very first impression you get is that 1, this is a very, very big ship, and 2, I am very, very small. Andor uses this very same technique. Most of the cinematography in this show has the camera placed on the ground level looking up at something daunting, like on the heist arc when a TIE fighter flies through the valley. TIE fighters before this have only really been seen as a mere expendable ship number 14,355. But in Andor, you get why people would fear them. It would be terrifying to hear that sound from above. The dialogue actually feels like people conversing with one another, rather than a Joss Whedon type dialogue like in the sequel trilogy.
So who talks first? You talk first? I talk first.
Or overly stoic dialogue like the other Disney Plus shows. The conversations and how they talk with others are directly tied to what stage they are in their character arcs, like how good characters are supposed to be written. A good example of this is in Season 1, Episode 6, called The Eye. In this episode, Andor and a crew of the other rebels plan to rob an Imperial vault and steal millions in credits. In short, they do succeed with the heist, but suffer some casualties.
Are you crazy? Are you anymore?
But Cassian, at this point, just wants to do the heist, get his share, and get out. Now, by this point, Andor has been shown to be similar to Han Solo. You know, kind of a schmuck, a cheater. You've seen it before.
But I got a nice, easy charter now. I'll pay you back, plus a little extra.
I wish I could, but it's in play. Just waiting to hear they're on site, okay?
I just need a little more time.
Seriously.
I'm not one of these losers gonna let you float until they forget how much you owe them.
But after the heist, this dickhead offers Cassian a deal.
You wanna guess how much is in there? 80 million, give or take. What'd you tell me? You wanna win and walk away. 40 million apiece.
Now, normally, Andor from Episode 1 would have said yes. He would have absolutely accepted that deal. And this schmuck reminds him of his old self. And he hates it. He feels insulted by the offer. He now gets to see what he is and has previously stood for, and he feels repulsed by it. So, you know. You know, on the surface, it's a guy yapping about splitting the pot and running. On a deeper level, it's a man coming to terms with his past mistakes. The characters feel dynamic and fleshed out in this world.
Work.
And to make decisions according to what they believe in rather than what is logically the best thing to do at that moment. But probably the best example of the show's writing is with the character of Cyril Khan, who is by far one of the most interesting and complex characters in all of Star Wars.
Have you modified your uniform?
Perhaps slightly.
His arc across the 2 seasons has been so expertly crafted, and he's not even a good guy. I wouldn't even call him a bad guy either. He's kind of a guy who's been dealt bad hands, but lacks the self-awareness to realise that the system he commits himself to doesn't care about him at all. When he's first introduced, he's tailored his suit to make him look more professional.
Pockets piping and some light.
Taylor.
He always makes sure to stand up perfectly straight and is working his ass off to hunt Andor to get that promotion and rise the Imperial ranks, which, as you know, doesn't go so well. And it ruins him. He gets fired and has to go back and live with his mother.
Mother, you're dripping.
What? But still strives to redeem himself to the Empire. But by the time he does, in his eyes, when he finally realizes the truth, it's already too late. At this point, he helped in committing an actual genocide. And then when he sees the guy who he thinks has ruined his life, he attacks him. Only to find out that the guy he has been obsessing over for the past 2 to 3 years doesn't even know who he is.
Who are you?
Then he dies for nothing. I'm gonna exaggerate a little bit, but I think it's brilliant how the writers gave him enough self-reflection that he realizes he has played a role in destroying an entire civilization and knows it's wrong.
What are we doing here?
Following orders.
How long? But not enough acknowledgement to walk away from his fascism and instead have a reverse character arc in response. Absolute cinema. In the world of Star Wars, the Empire has been a pretty one-dimensional villain. They are about as surface level as you can get. I mean, let's call it what it is. Based on what we see in the movies, they are pretty shallow actually. They just look really cool with a really cool guy with a red lightsaber. Not once in the original Star Wars movies did we ever actually learn how the Empire functions or what they actually do that makes them so evil, other than just killing people. Killing a lot of people. You know, it's a generic bad guy who destroys people and wants power antagonist. Andor, though, fleshes out the Empire in a pretty interesting way. We learn a bit more about their philosophy.
No one is getting out!
Their bureaucratic way of thinking, their ego. We learn how they micromanage and bully the average citizen. And what I think intrigues me the most is that it's really hammering up its real-world parallels, more so than what we have previously seen. Andor has added propaganda, news, misinformation, but Star Wars. Andor has added an imperial form of oppression on a judicial level, but Star Wars. Andor has added a more grounded vision of what it's like to live under an oppressive army, but Star Wars. We have seen Star Wars show how bad the Empire is. You know, they are bad, they want to control the universe, but we have never actually seen what they actually do to the people. You know, in season 1, Andor gets thrown in prison for 6 years because he just walked weirdly.
I'm a tourist.
Tourists don't run.
But I'm not running.
He doesn't get a chance to defend himself legally. They just go, fuck you, 6 years on a sentence that used to be 6 months, which is actually just based on nothing.
6 years.
Star Wars has always been political.
And I wanted to use those motifs to deal with issues that existed today.
Order 66 is the Night of the Long Knives. The Empire versus the Rebels is based on the Vietnam War. George even said it himself.
Good guys are the rebels. They're using asymmetric warfare against a highly organized empire. I think we call those guys terrorists today. We call them Mujahideen, we call them Al-Qaeda.
When I did it, they were Viet Cong.
So were you thinking of that at the time?
Yes.
So obviously this quote-unquote empire will actually act and do things an oppressive empire would do upon the people it is oppressing. People might not want to think about it, but soldiers deployed by an oppressive regime usually do bad things to the people it's oppressing. Some people didn't like this though, like this guy who says the Empire or Darth Vader wouldn't condone sexual assault. Meanwhile... So to those people, I recommend something a little more digestible like Star Wars Young Jedi Adventures. What is funny about this whole thing is that this entire trilogy was basically all responsible because 2 dickhead Imperial officers harassed the wrong guy. which kicked off the chain of events which led to the Empire's demise. Andor was evidence that a darker, more mature tone for Star Wars can work in a world that is usually dominated by light, family-friendly fantasy fun for the whole family. The only problem, I feel, is if it can maintain a tone like this in a world that is usually dominated by light, family-friendly fantasy fun for the whole family. What's funny about Andor is when K2 does this.
You with us?
No.
But what is really funny about Andor is that it's honestly so good that it gets ruined by the very franchise it builds upon. When it's in the same universe as this, and this, and this, and this, and this, and this, and this. Personally, I think Star Wars should delve a little further deeper into this direction. But what Disney really needs to learn from Andor is that you should assume your audience is smart and not like a dumb little kid. I mean, Andor even made me care about French people. Also, I want Battlefront 3.